Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So this is going to be the first of 3 parts in the series on the Moscow Sicilian, mainly for the black pieces. So in this first video, we're going to be talking about the third move, knight c6. So after e4, c5, knight f3, d6, white plays this move bishop e5 check. And in this video, we're going to be looking at the least popular of the 3 options to block the check, which is the move knight c6. Now, I think that this variation is actually quite dead, and I think white has a very easy path to advantage. And so I'm going to show the various lines, and I really try to make this work for black, but I just think that it's not really playable. Notably, in this position after knight f3, black can also enter this position from bishop knight c6 and bishop b5, the Rossolimo, and then play d6. But clearly, just playing knight c6 in this position is not really desirable. So the thing is that with this pin is really annoying, and white can often occupy the center really quickly with a move like c3, d4, especially after castling, and it becomes really annoying to develop here. So for example, after castles, black's main move is to play the move bishop d7. Now they need to break the pin here, because if they play a move like knight f6, this runs into e5. And after d5, knight e5, there's going to be the structure is going to break here, because there's going to be a captures on c6, and black has really no compensation for the damage structure. White is also ahead in development, so this is really undesirable, which is why bishop d7 is typically played here first. And white can play the move rook e1 here, preparing the bishop to drop back to f1 after black plays the move a6. And in general, I think that in the anti-Sicilians, if white is allowed to play rook e1 and bishop f1 and consolidate their pieces in response to a6, then I think they're doing very well. Another example of this is in the Rossolimo Sicilian after bishop b5, and in this variation with e6. Bishop takes c6 is a possible move, but castle here is also possible. Knight g7, and the idea is to prepare a6 and recapture on c6 with a knight. And in this position, white is just in time to play rook e1. And it's known in this variation that after a6 and bishop f1, the line goes d5, takes, and then d4. White is known to have a very stable and small advantage here. It becomes quite unpleasant to play for black. And I just want to show this idea because it shows that if white is able to consolidate with rook e1 and bishop f1 in response to black playing a6, then this becomes a really favorable position. So going back to this position after castles, bishop d7, rook e1, black has 2 choices here. The main move historically has been knight f6, so we're going to be looking at that first. And there's also the move a6 here. Now it's a bit different, because if we play knight f6, the knight is possibly vulnerable to potential bishop g5, or even after c3, d4, the possibility of e5. And so black needs to be really careful here. After c3, white is preparing to occupy the center fully with d4, and black plays the typical move a6, kicking the bishop back. And you don't really want to take on c6 here, because there's pressure on e4, but this can actually be a very interesting pawn sacrifice after bishop g5. We're going to be looking at that through the other move order. Before black plays knight f6, black can also just play a6 first, and then enter this kind of position. But that we're going to be looking at that later. The main move here is bishop f1, just consolidating the bishop and preparing d4 next. And clearly, if white is able to occupy the center with d4, they're just going to be much better. If we take, then they're going to be able to develop the knight to c3. And so here, the main move is to play the move bishop g4, arguing that if you play d4 now, then black will take and damage the structure with bishop takes f3, seeing that queen takes f3 is not possible since it drops the pawn. However, it's noted in this position that after g takes f3, white has a big advantage because of the big center, and it doesn't really matter that these pawns are doubled, because if the structure is not undermined, even after, like, let's say d5, and black doesn't even want to take on e4 because that would undouble the pawns, and white just has a big center. The main move here is to play the move d5, although e5 has been tried in the past. This is just a bad move because white can gain the center fully. Knight d4, bishop e3, let's say bishop e7. Taking on d4 is possible, but Even stronger is to play f4, undermining the pawn. And after castles, takes, and with this other f-pawn advance, white is going to undouble their f-pawns, and they just get a big center here. So this is just really bad for black. And so the main move here is to play d5. And white has two paths to advantage. They can either play e5, kicking the knight away, knight h5, f4, attacking the knight. So g6 here brings the knight back. But after f5, white just has like a big advantage due to the initiative. And so that's one way to get an advantage. Another way is to play knight c3, just holding the center together after e6, bishop g5. And it becomes really unpleasant to deal with this because the king is still uncastled, there's pressure on the e-file, and there's pressure on the pawn on d5. So after bishop e7, bishop f6, and e takes on d5, knight takes d4, rook e4 is really powerful, and this threatens to win the knight. So no move here really works out for black. Knight f5 has been chosen the most, but after d6, castled, e takes f7. We can't even take on f7 here because of bishop c4. So after king h8, white just has a big advantage here. They're up 2 pawns for the time being, possibly just going to be down 1 pawn later. But it's interesting that black has a really good score in this position, mainly I think because it's played in faster time controls, and the double pawns, there's the double pawns, black has a good bishop here, but still it's not enough compensation for the damaged, for the loss of material. Another way is to play queen b6, but after d6, knight takes e6. If black is able to castle, then I think they're just going to be better because of this weak structure. But this knight d5 move, first off attacking the bishop and the queen, is really annoying. We have to retreat back, queen d8, and queen a4 check. And after we block the check with b5, black can play knight f6, forcing g takes f6, because if we take with the queen, then our rook is undefended. So bishop takes b5 just wins a pawn. And after g takes f6, queen a3, clearly black is struggling here because they can't castle. King is stuck in the center, double pawn still, white's rook is active. This is just a really bad position. We can't even challenge the queen with queen e7 because again, bishop takes b5 just wins a pawn. So all in all, this variation is quite bad for black, to allow this in the main line, to allow this c3 d4. Another way to play for black is after bishop d7 and rook e1 is to play a6, but I still think that black is struggling here. The best way, or the maximalist way to gain advantage is to play bishop f1, although bishop takes c6 is also perfectly good, because the logic here is that white does not waste time with a move like bishop f1 and tries to open up the center immediately with d4. They can play d4 here, or they can enter this interesting gambit with c3, knight f6, attacking the pawn, and clearly if they play a move like d3, this is very passive, and black has no problems after getting the bishop to g7. So d4 here is really powerful, and we don't really want to take because this would just allow this kind of position. Bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, and our b7 pawn is going to drop next if we want to try to develop, with e6 and stuff. And instead of that, bishop takes e4, and white has 2 ways to try to play this gambit. They can, if they play a move like knight bd2, then we can follow the sample line bishop c6, dc5, takes queen e2, e6. But I think that black is doing quite well in this kind of position if they're able to exchange off the pieces. The problem here is that black cannot castle yet, and this is quite a big problem actually. They're up a pawn, but still, with the lack in development, white has full compensation. Another way to play is this move bishop g5, threatening bishop takes f6. So after bishop d5, white can play knight bd2 here, possibly, though after e6, I think c4, bishop takes f3, queen f3, cd4. This becomes really interesting because the structure changes a lot. Queen takes b7, bishop g7, queen c6 check, misplacing the king, king f8. And this position is playable for black, although it's very wild and messy, clearly. And instead of knight bd2, c4 is also a very interesting gambit. The idea is to lure the bishop away from the d5 square, and after knight c3, damaging the pawn structure here doesn't really matter. Let's say, for example, bishop f6, gf6, d5 trying to trap the bishop, but e5 here is really strong, and after knight c3 and bishop e5, preparing to retreat back, black just is 2 pawns up and has a very solid structure in the center. So this is not desirable. And knight c3 is a main move, but after bishop e6, d5 becomes really complicated, and the bishop is forced away either to f5 or g4, and yeah, lines can continue something like this: bishop f6, gf6, and black cannot castle, and the e7 pawn is going to be weak if the bishop is developed outwards. So very interesting position. I think white can try to play for an advantage here, although objectively it's equal. It's not easy for a human to play. So that's the interesting gambit after c3 in this position. However, d4 here just I think takes full is simpler to play first off, and after cd4, knight d4, we don't want to allow captures on c6 possibly, so rook c8, c4, and white typically gets the Maroczy bind here. And if we want to play this in a Maroczy bind, a typical fashion against a Maroczy bind, g6 and bishop g7 is a really common way to develop instead of e6, which may weaken the d6 pawn. So after g6, b3, bishop g7, knight c3, and knight f6, white has two options here. They can either go for the positional approach of just playing bishop b2 and castles, and I think just white is slightly better objectively. Like it's like plus 0.5, but I think that it's really difficult to play for black because they are not getting the b5 break anytime soon. Neither are they getting the d5 break anytime soon. And with the bishop here kind of strangely on c6, I'm not sure that black fully equalizes, and this is really difficult to play actually. So that's like the dream Maroczy bind position that white can achieve. Another move here is knight d5, pointing out that we don't really want to take on d5 because that would create just a better structure for white, since the rook is on the e file. e7 is a permanent weakness, so this is not desirable. And if we castled here, then bishop g5, noting again that taking on d5 is not desirable, and the pressure here is really annoying on f6 because there's a threat of just doubling the pawns. And instead, if we play b5 here, which at least we get a b5 is our argument. After c takes b5, bishop takes b5, and bishop g5, again there are problems here since we don't want to take on d5. So after castles, bishop f6, bishop takes f6, knight f6, ef6, and a move like h4 here, threatening h5. So we'll stop that, and queen d2. White has a very simple plan of just putting pressure on the weak pawns, especially d6. And so this position is really difficult to play once again. So yeah, white, you can see that has many paths to advantage in this line after the move a6. And instead, also bishop f1 is possible, just not giving up the bishop pair. And the idea is again to go for this bishop g4 move, saying that now at least if you play c3, d4, again I will have the opportunity to take on f3. But in this position, white has two options. So notably, this move has been chosen. This a6 move has been chosen by Nakamura twice in 2014, but only in blitz. After bishop f1 and bishop g4, white has two paths to advantage. They can go for the same idea with c3 and preparing d4 as in the previous variation. After e6, though in this position d4 possibly allows white to or black to fight back. c takes d4, cd4, bishop f3, gf3, and d5 here. And if we go for the same line as before, with knight c3, black can play bishop e7. So if we play knight f6, then this would try to expose the bishop g5 as we saw before, which is just good for white. So bishop e7, ed5, ed5, bishop g5, and after this move we can't play knight f6, so king f8, because knight f6 would just allow doubling of pawns. So king f8, and after bishop e3 retreating back, there are ideas of like queen b3 here. The king is misplaced. White has the bishop pair, so this again, there are many paths to advantage in this line. Another way to play is e takes d5, queen takes d5, attacking the d4 pawn, and after bishop e3, knight f6, knight c3, and queen d7. If black is able to play bishop e7 and castles, and they're able to play against this isolated queen's pawn, then they're going to be actually like much better. There's also weak structure here, but white is just in time to play this move d5. And after knight takes d5, knight d5, ed5, bishop c5 check, bishop e7, queen a4, putting some pressure on the position, preventing short castles because of this pin. Black and long castle here, and objectively this position is holdable for black, though it's not really pleasant to play with, with the bishops eyeing down the black king position, the open c file and everything. So all things considered, this is objectively equal, but quite difficult to play. So yeah, c3 d4 is possible, but another typical way to gain a very small advantage is to play this move h3, and this just seeks to gain the bishop pair, because bishop h5 can be met with g4 and d4 here with a big advantage. So bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, and after knight f6, queen g3 here, let's say, preventing the development of the bishop, knight h5, queen e3, because queen g4 can just be met with a repetition, so queen e3. And the problem here again is that white is able to either fully control the center with d4, do after d5 here, dc5, knight takes e4, b4, bishop e7. The best move here is bishop d3, allowing this interesting tactic. d4, queen g3, putting pressure on g7, do after d takes e3. Taking the pawn here is not really desirable because of bishop f6, with the bishop on d3 hanging and c2 possibly coming to trap the rook. It's still okay for white. I mean, it's still better for black after queen h6 still, but like something like this is still good for black. But yeah, best here is actually, instead of taking the pawn, is to play bishop f4 after castles. White just has the bishop pair, and yeah, very two beautiful bishops on these diagonals. The pawn on c3 will fall eventually after a3, let's say, just defending the pawn. White just has a long-term advantage in this kind of position. So d4 again is possible, but d3 here is just really nice to maintain the small center, but playing for kingside expansion with g3, f4, knight d2, and white can even possibly seek to put pressure on the queen side with something like a3, b4. So yeah, after this position, it's really difficult to play. So again, I don't think that yeah, this variation is very playable. Yeah, c3 is possible, but h3 was notably chosen by Caruana against Nakamura in 2014. And in that game, he chose bishop h5, which actually just allows a big center here with c3 following d4. And this is just a full center for free. Yeah, I don't really understand why this would be good. Let's see, e5, d4, takes, knight f6, knight c3, bishop e7. But after taking on e5, there's a big hole on d5 here. After queen b3, putting pressure on the queen side and making use of this strong outpost on d5, white is just much better here. So instead of that, bishop takes f3 again is possible, but I think that black is still struggling either after g6 or after e6. Yeah, white can just play for a solid small center again like before, going for c3, knight f6, let's say bishop e3, knight d7, and just even going for this typical play on the queen side with b5, b4, a typical minority attack, is not enough, because I think white can quickly support the center with, let's say, knight d2, castles, queen d1, preparing knight f3 to support d4, after b5, knight f3, and even if we accomplish b4 here, this is a very double-edged move, because realistically it's the only way to gain counterplay against a white setup, but it weakens the structure and actually makes the queen side quite vulnerable. Let's say after queen a4, attacking the knight, queen c7, and d4, I don't see how black equalizes in this position, because possibly the c file will open up. There's actually pressure on the queen side here, and our entire idea with pushing b4 kind of backfires. So I think that there are many ways, in conclusion, there are many ways to gain an advantage here for black in this, for white to gain an advantage against this knight c6 move. So yeah, you can choose one of the lines that I propose in this video. if you're playing from the white side. So yeah, I hope this video was educational, and if you have any other suggestions, then please comment those down below. And in the next video, we're going to be looking at the more serious of the 3 moves, bishop d7. And yeah, we'll look at all of those positions. I really try to make it playable, but I still think that white has an edge in those Marxi-bind positions. So yeah, that's gonna be it from me. That's gonna be it from me in this video, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.